gentlemen seen your midterm grades yet?
Oh, they're not posted yet, sir.
2 C's, 2 D's, and an F. That's a 1.2 grade average. Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
This is WICR.
From the basement of La Penta, this is your host, The Rock is on this Thursday, November 17th, 2016. We are approaching, we're heading into the final quarter of the NFL season in a few weeks. We're going to talk a lot of football this week. We're not going to be on next week because it's Thanksgiving, but this is going to be a football segment show. And before I get into my first topic, I just want to get into some major news or major developing news for the NFL. And the Rams' first-round pick, the first overall pick in this past year's NFL draft, Jared Goff, will be starting for the Los Angeles Rams this coming Sunday against the Miami Dolphins. So let's see what he brings to the table, and maybe he is the face of the franchise for this Rams team moving forward. But with that being said, let's dive into our first segment of the day of The Rock is on. And I'm going to talk about the New York Jets because this has just been a shipwreck. You know, as a fan, I try to keep faith even when things are going bad and it's just, things are going to pan out for you or not going to pan out for this team and that they have no chance. But you know what? I kept faith. I just kept faith. And now, when they lost to the Dolphins, that's when I just threw in the towel and I said, you know what? They're not going anywhere this year. This is a lost season for this team. Because they were riding at 3-5. Granted, they beat two bad teams, the Browns and the Ravens, but, they'll take it. And if they had beat the Dolphins and then the Rams, they would have been 5-5 going to the bye week. And that game against the Patriots, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, would have had some playoff implications. And the Jets would have been relevant going into December, even if they had lost that game and would have been 5-6. But that's not the case because NBC flexed that game out and put the Chiefs and the Broncos in. So now, instead of Patriots-Jets being the primetime game, it's going to be Chiefs-Broncos, and the Jets and Patriots will play at 4:25 instead of Eastern time instead of 8:30 Eastern time, the prime time spot for Sunday Night Football. But the main question for the Jets this year should be, who is going, or where do the Jets go from here? And that answer is up. It's got to be up. I mean, you're currently 3-7. You had lofty expectations this year because you're coming off a 10-win season, and you were just one lousy game away, one win away from making the playoffs. But they choked on the big stage on Week 17 last year against the Bills, and it just seems like after that game, it's just been a downward spiral for this team ever since. You figure Ryan Fitzpatrick, that game probably hurt him psychologically. He doesn't play as well this year as he did last year. Then wants the whole contract, big money and all that. Only getting a 1-year deal, and, everyone knows what happened. But, when you have 10 wins, even if you don't make the playoffs, when you have 10 wins, or you're coming off a 10-win season, you got to improve. You got to build on that. And the Jets aren't going to do that this year. They regressed. It's like they took, after Rex Ryan's final year when they went 4-12, and then going into Todd Bowles' first year, last year, it's like they took one step forward, and then this year they took 2 steps back. It's unreal. It's incomprehensible. It's like, how do you go from being a solid double-digit win team in the NFL, 10-win team in the NFL, to barely getting 6 wins if they're lucky, looking at the schedule and based on how they play. But what's been a major concern for the Jets this year, there's 3 things, and I'm going to rank them from 3 to 1. It's, first, the pass rush has been inconsistent. This is number 3. Pass rush has been inconsistent. This is supposed to be a ferocious pass rush. They're supposed to dominate the line of scrimmage, put and strike fear in the opposition week after week. They're supposed to They're supposed to stop opposing teams' running game. They're supposed to make the quarterback force errant throws, make them feel uncomfortable. And granted, they showed some shades of what could have been at times this year, but for the most part, they've been inconsistent. And this defensive line does have that potential. It does, with Muhammad Wilkerson, Sheldon Richardson, and Leonard Williams. But then when you hear your two leading guys, your two veteran guys in Muhammad Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson, that they're missing practices, they're not going through walkthroughs, they're skipping meetings, it's appalling if you think about it as a fan. And you know what? And when I heard the news about Muhammad Wilkerson, that he skipped meetings, I was flabbergasted because I wouldn't think he was that kind of guy or he wasn't that person. Because you know he's a hard. Because what I've seen over the last few years from him, he was a hard worker. You know, doesn't draw a lot of attention to himself, stays under the radar, and just doesn't have any off the field issues. Now Sheldon Richardson. Now if you told me he did that, okay, I can believe it because you know we all heard of the off the field issues he had. You know when he was driving 125 miles per hour with a kid in the back with a loaded gun, car smelling like weed. And I get that. And failing multiple drug tests. And who knows, he'll probably get traded in the offseason, so you may not have these three players play another game for the Jets after this year. So that's something to keep in mind. But that's number 3. Number 2 is the secondary continually getting burnt week after week. And this is a real head scratcher to me. It's a real head scratcher because these are the same players that the Jets had last year when they won 10 games. Darrelle, pretty much for the most part. No Cromartie because they parted ways with him. But you have Darrelle Revis, Buster Skrine, Michael Gilchrist, and Calvin Pryor. Those guys were making plays last year and forcing turnovers. And it's like this year, it's like every week there's like a lack of communication. Somebody's not doing their job or not doing their assignment they're supposed to be doing, and that's leading to big plays for the opposition. And like I said, it's just head scratching. It really is. And that's another thing with this defense overall. They don't force turnovers. They only have about maybe 6-7 turnovers this whole year. And we're going to week 11, or by the time they play again, because they're on their bye week, week 12. Come on. They're going to be lucky enough to get 10 turnovers. And have double-digit turnovers, or force double-digit turnovers. But referring back to the secondary, though, these are the same players from last year. And it's the same defensive scheme, same defensive coordinator in Casey Rogers. So it's like, what the hell happened? What happened with this secondary? You know, you don't have rookies, you know, getting acclimated to the NFL, from college to the NFL game. So that's not the case. It's not a new defensive coordinator, so it's not a new scheme. And even if it was a new defensive coordinator, it was only going to take about maybe 3-4 games just to get acclimated to the scheme during the games. So it's like it's nothing new. It's not like, you know, somebody threw, or like this defense, or the defensive coordinator Casey Rogers threw a curveball at these guys at their secondary, and they drew something else, or they drew something new up. That's not the case. Same scheme, same players, same coaches, and a lot different results. And it's for the worse. And that's before I get into the first point of the Jets, or the number one disappointment for the Jets this year, I gotta say, Darrelle Revis, man, he's just terrible, flat out terrible. Because I'm gonna admit, I like Darrelle as a fan. I like Darrelle Revis. I appreciate what he did. You know, he was a great player, but it just seemed like after his ACL injury, he just never was the same. He was never that true shutdown corner that would take the best wide receiver out of the game and give the Jets a chance to win week after week. He's getting burnt on every single play. I gave him a pass the first week against A.J. Green because I said, okay, it was a busted coverage. Somebody wasn't doing their assignment. It happens. Happens to every team in the NFL. But then it's like when you watch the games week after week, he's just getting burnt. And it's not that these wide receivers are better. And it's not these big-name wide receivers that are beating him on one-on-one. It's like you have these no-name guys. Like, you have Terrell Pryor from the Browns beating him. He had, like, what, 6 catches or 6 to 10 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown? Or about Goodwin from the Bills. And that wasn't a busted coverage. That was just, it was like a track meet, and he won the race, Goodwin, in week 2. And, you know, if you're the Jets, you have 2 options. You either tell Revis to reconstruct his contract and move him to free safety or move him to safety, or you cut ways with him and he'll play somewhere else. Because I think he's owned somewhere between 13 and 15 million, and the way he's performing this year, I don't think the Jets are going to pay him that much money. Now, if he was doing a decent job, then they would consider it, but that is certainly not the case this year. And now, for the number one disappointment this year for the Jets, has to be the quarterback position and the offense. Because the quarterback, and just want to say, the quarterback play has just been so inept. Absolutely inept. You know, because you have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who last year had 31 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, you know, set the record for most touchdown passes by a Jet QB in the history of the franchise. The Jets were a juggernaut on offense because you had Brandon Marshall, because you had Eric Decker, who was healthy. Wasn't healthy this year, but last year when Decker was healthy, he was the go-to guy for Fitzpatrick, and he was drawing double coverage, and Brandon Marshall was getting majority of the one-on-ones, and he was winning the one-on-ones for the most part. So that's why he had a great year last year, and this year it's not so much. But what I realized from this year to last year with Ryan Fitzpatrick is he last year, when he was leading the Jets on offense, and he was the quarterback, the Jets, it seemed like majority of the time, they were scoring touchdowns, and they were capitalizing in the end zone, or in the red zone. Because the Jets last year, I think they were, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were third. They were the third best team in the red zone in terms of scoring touchdowns. Now this year they're one of the worst. They're like 28th, 29th. So how do you drop? How do you fall from being the third best team in the red zone or being the top 5 in scoring touchdowns in the red zone to being the bottom 5 of scoring touchdowns in the red zones in a span of a year? How does that happen? Tell me how does that happen? How does that happen? It shouldn't happen. But why? How does it happen? I understand Decker got hurt. That was a big loss. That was a big blow for the Jets. That was detrimental for the Jets offensively. But still, come on. Should have at least been in the top 15 or the upper 15 or 16. Should have been the upper 16 in the red zone, though, if you're not going to be in the top 5. But that's a significant drop-off, folks. Really, it is. And you know, going after this year, at the rate this is going, the Jets are going to have a top 10 pick. I say they get to 6 wins if they're lucky. They're going to have a top 10 pick. And you know, Mike Maccagnan, general manager Mike Maccagnan, and head coach Todd Bowles have to, and I repeat, they have to hit a home run in this draft. In next year's draft, in 2017. They have to. Because you can't go from 10 wins to 5-6 wins, or from year 1 to 5 to 6 wins in year 2. Now, if it was the opposite, then there's less pressure on them to win. But now there's going to be more pressure. There's going to be a lot more pressure. Because you know what? If the Jets were 5-11 or 6-10 last year, and they showed strides of improvement this year, there wouldn't be that much pressure going into year 3. Because they're showing progression. But that's not the case here. The Jets are showing regression, going from 10 to possibly 5-6 wins. And like I said previously, Mike Maccagnan and Todd Bowles need to hit a home run in this draft. It's imperative. And what I mean by hit a home run, they have the players they select, the players they draft, you better hope they make an immediate impact on this Jet team for 2017. And hopefully the Jets can make the playoffs for next year. Because if they don't make the playoffs this next year, it's probably going to be both Todd Bowles and Mike Maccagnan are going to be shown the door. That just shows you how tough the NFL is as a business. And it's kind of like a win-now approach. Now, I know it's not up to me, but if I were Woody Johnson, depending on the circumstances at the quarterback position, if you're going to start Bryce Petty, and that's another issue they're going to have at quarterback, because both Ryan Fitzpatrick and Geno Smith are going to be gone, and you're going to have Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg on the roster, and you're probably going to have to bring in another quarterback, whether it's free agency or the draft, but it's probably going to be free agency, because I really don't see them drafting another quarterback. But if you do, if I were Woody Johnson, this is what I would have done. If Todd Bowles and Mike Maccagnan, let's just say, decide that Bryce Petty is the guy, is the starter, or he's going to be the guy next year, right? And let's say you give him one full season. Let's see how he plays. If he does well, let's say he leads the Jets to an 8-8 or 9-7 record, and they miss the playoffs. I would not fire Todd Bowles if that was the case. If that was the case. Then I'd give him year 2, and then there would be more pressure for him to win that year. And you hope that Petty can, lead the Jets to the playoffs in his second year. If he's the guy. But if he's not, then it's like, where are you going to go? What direction are you going to lead to? You're going to get Tony Romo? No way. I repeat, I do not want Tony Romo on the Jets for next season. I do not. I understand when you watched his press conference about Dak Prescott and the Cowboys and the way they're winning even without him, he's just one hit. He's a good player, but he has a history of injuries, and he's just one hit away from pretty much being done for the year or done for a season. And knowing Woody Johnson or the reputation he has, he's going to try to make a splash with the headlines, and he's going to try to seek all the attention he gets, whether it was signing Brett Favre, it wasn't Curtis Martin, it was Brett Favre, Tim Tebow. You people get my point. But I do not want Tony Romo. I hope Tony Romo is not on this team next year. I really do. But also, if you're going to rely on Bryce Petty, let's say if Bryce Petty is the guy going to next year, then you're going to have veteran wide receivers like Eric Decker, Brandon Marshall, going to work with a rookie. Now, I'm not saying they're going to have I'm not going to say they're not going to like that, or they're going to despise the fact that they have to work with a guy they have no experience with. But, I don't think they want it's going to be difficult to adjust to another quarterback. And those guys both like Fitz, both as a player and as a person. But you know what? Who knows? Maybe Petty could be the guy. He showed some strides in the game against the Rams, even though they lost, and he threw a pick in the final drive. But I think the Jets, if you watch the game on Sunday, they were very conservative with Petty. They didn't want to make him. They didn't want to make him have too many mistakes. Excuse me, and they kind of handcuffed him and just played it conservatively, short little dump off passes. And watching Petty though, he could throw the ball. He could throw a good deep ball. Because he hit Robbie Anderson on a 52-yard drive from the Jets' 1-yard line. The Jets were pinned back, and he threw a deep pass to Robbie Anderson for 52 yards. and it was just a perfectly thrown ball. Fitzpatrick doesn't have that arm strength. Geno has that arm strength. And I don't think Hackenberg has that arm strength. Bryce Petty has that arm strength. But with that being said, though, it's going to be... This Jet team is going to be an enigma. It's going to be a big, big enigma going into next season. Because you're going to know. Because they have a lot of holes. Multiple holes. It's at quarterback, at tight end, at the offensive line, and the secondary. Those are the 4 main holes they have to fix. And they have to fix fast. I don't know what their salary cap is, nor do I know who's going to be a free agent next year. That's a conversation for another time, but Mike, this is the final. I say this numerous times during this segment. Mike McCagnon and Todd Bowles have to hit a home run in this draft, and not only in the draft, but in free agency. Because if you think about it, around this time, if they don't do a good enough job for next year, you can be talking about another head coaching search for the Jets. And it's just going to be the same old song that never ends. And with that being said, that concludes this segment of The Rock Is On.